Thanks for joining in the Pivotal Podcast, where we talk about young adults with young adults. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Pivotal Podcast. We are back for this is officially our third episode. Our first one was kind of a little bit of a teaser. Then our second one was Andrea and I just talking about us and the vision for the podcast. And we are so excited. We've been waiting to get to this day to have our very first guest. So we're excited for that. We're going to introduce her, and that is, we're not in the same place. I know you think we are, but we are actually not in a lavish studio.
No, we are not.
Via technology, we're in a Zoom meeting, and we've invited a wonderful person that I've been able to get to know the last couple of years, Megan O'Brien, and she is there. There she is. Yes, for those of you on our video version of the Pivotal Podcast, you can see Megan. And if you're not, so sorry. That just really stinks because you don't get to see the wonderful face of Megan O'Brien. So let me just tell you a little story. I might accidentally call her Mega. And Megan, is it okay if I tell them why? Okay.
Of course.
I actually always call her Mega, and I just chopped the end off because we actually used to work together. Years ago, we worked together, and there's this weird thing that happens when you come on staff at Southside. A wooden carving of your name shows up, like on the desk. And I think I know who does this, but I'm not 100% sure. Well, anyway, and it was like this wooden block said Megan O'Brien, but in pretty short order, the end broke off. Like someone dropped hers or something. And so it was just Mega. And so I love that because
oh my gosh,
Megan has such a mega personality. She has a lot of love. She has a really cool story. That she's going to get to in just a few minutes. But anyway, here's our guest, Megan O'Brien. And you really are like a living, breathing young adult. And that's like what Andrea and I are here for. We're here to connect with the young adult culture. So super, super excited. Because I don't know if you can tell on this video podcast, Andrea and I are not young adults. We are
no,
but Mega represents our people, and so we really love connecting with and investing in young adults. So any way that this podcast can not just encourage and perpetuate a conversation for and with young adults, but also there's a lot of people like Andrea and I that are just so desperately interested in wanting to invest in those who are in that stage of life. So anything we can do to encourage them is really awesome too. So hi, Andrea, by the way.
Hi, Jerry. Hey. Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm excited, Megan, because I just met you like 2 seconds ago in this beautiful office that we're sitting in, which was a beach at one point and other things. So I'm in a different state than you. So I do wish that I could like high five you and see you in person, but this is the next best thing. And we're excited. We're just excited that you said yes and you're willing to enter into a conversation with us. And we want people to be able to hear the voices of young adults. So I don't know anything about your story. So this is exciting to me. But I do have one question because Jerry just said he worked with you at some point. So I was just wondering, do you have anything to say about working with Jerry? Like if there was something that you wanted these viewers to know about Jerry, what would it be?
One thing is that no matter what he's doing, if you just want to bother him and like talk to him for like 5 minutes about absolutely like nothing, he'll entertain it. He was always the type that he'll like stop it, even if he's in the middle of something so important, and will like give you his undivided attention and just give you that little like boost to where you're like, I'm gonna go back and finish my day. So he was a really awesome coworker. I miss working with him.
That's awesome. I have one more question for you. Even though this podcast isn't about Jerry, but since he's sitting there in his crazy shirt, Jerry does wear a lot of crazy shirts. Like, I feel like that's kind of his like thing. What is the craziest shirt you've ever seen him in?
I don't know. Maybe they all run together. I think he has unique style. So maybe just since in like the grand scheme of it, all of it just seems like it fits and none of it stands out.
Oh man, that's good. That was a good
Yeah,
answer.
unique style. I think that's a really nice way of putting something that you maybe didn't want to say. Just, what a
No, but
unique style. That
it's not
sounded
bad.
like someone walks out of like the barber shop or the hair salon and they're like, "Hey, what do you think?" That's the response you would give if you're trying to be polite. Oh, what a unique style that is.
So
I
true.
mean,
Oh, yeah, that's funny.
um,
And by the way, undivided attention is the only kind that I have. So don't give me too much credit. Like I can literally do one thing at a time. So when I'm looking at you, I don't have the capacity to like think other thoughts. So undivided
Uh,
attention is the only thing I got.
love
it's
it.
good.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so it's been a number of years since Mega and I have worked together, and I do pine for those days. But I'm so glad that we get to. I mean, usually at least once a week we get to see each other and connect with our young adult community, and that's always really beautiful. And I'm always appreciative of what Megan brings to our conversations and just her heart for people. And so, anyway, we're going to dive right in. So, yes, I do want to thank Megan for being our very first guest on the Pivotal podcast. And I hope that this is just the first. You get to be the first, but we're going to have a long line of really cool conversations following this one. So, big thanks to everybody for tuning in and connecting with us. And lucky you get to hear a bit more about Megan O'Brien today. So, Megan, I have the first question that we want to ask to just kind of open up the conversation is really a two-parter. First of all, we would love to hear anything that you want to share about yourself. First of all, I hope that goes without saying. We would also love to hear a little bit about like your faith journey, and then incorporate, if you could, like how would you describe it today? Like, where would you say your faith journey, or however you want to qualify that, where would you say it is today, and how would you describe it? So I'm just going to turn it over to you, and you share whatever you want about you or about any of that.
Okay, well, thanks again for inviting me on. This is very fun. I feel very honored. You want to hear, talk with me and hear about my life. I would say about me is that the older I get, the more I'm like, wow, I don't think you ever have it figured out, and I'm still really learning that.
Yeah.
um, Especially within context of my life, like work, relationships, or even especially spiritually. I grew up Catholic, and I think that it was really good to have a strong foundation in of like who Jesus was, who God was, Holy Spirit. And then my parents got divorced and we moved cross country, and my one parent went to church, my other parent didn't. And then I loved going to church. That was one of the highlights of my weekends. I just loved being at church and like hearing the word and singing and just having like a space that felt so just separate than the rest of the world. And I guess when you're young, you don't even like have words to articulate it. I think it's just like soul level deep, that place is different and that you're doing something that you don't ever do in your everyday life. Well, you can, but it's like a separate holy place and thing. And then I moved in full time with a parent that didn't go to church. And then I kind of just drifted for a couple of years because I just didn't have a strong group of believers around me. I didn't have a church I felt like I could go to. And then when God is so cool, especially in the way He makes all things like work out, even when you're lost, like the ways He'll come and get you when you're like, I don't know where to go, what to do. Like whoever's out there, can you help me? My first day, or my second or third day of college, I can't remember which day it was. I was a music major, and you have to study like oral skills, so it's like rote. So I needed help on that because I had never done that before. And so I got connected with a tutor, and she and I met in a practice room, and she had me do some scales, and like I tried to repeat them back, and then I ended up just like breaking down and like crying and being like, I can't do this, I'm the worst, like I don't know why I'm here, blah blah blah. Just like I think a lot of it building up about how I'd felt, not even about oral skills, just like about life and how like lonely and sad I had felt, and I didn't know what to do with that. And
Mm.
she was very sweet and kind and let this person she barely knew like cry. And then at the end of it, she's like, I don't think it's a mistake we like met today. Can I take you to church?
Mm.
And so she took me to church, and she was the person when I was 18 that reintroduced me to who God was, because I had displaced anger about things in life at him when it really wasn't him. And so slowly through her, I peeled back a lot of the walls that I had, and she gave me a Bible, and I started reading that. And then a couple of years later, another roommate I had helped me fully commit, and it's been 4 years tomorrow, woohoo, of like rededicated to Christ and having like a Christ-centered life. And it's been incredible what the past 4 years have been, like fully surrendered to him, and how he's just given me more than I could have ever imagined, and given me community, which has been the biggest blessing ever, is having other people around me that are believers that I can lean on and go to for support, and also just be like refreshed with, and have like genuinely like some of the best times of my life and some of the best laughs. So that's where it's at. And today I'm still growing and learning to trust, I think, because life doesn't stop and the world doesn't stop. And so having the period of like getting saved and having that presence be super strong, and then obviously to grow, it's like your mom's like, all right, like I'm gonna leave you home alone, like I'll be back, like you trust your mom's gonna come back, but you're sitting in the house alone, like can somebody. So it's learning to just in the quiet still periods still know that like things are being done, he's still working, like everything is true. So it's not getting caught up in the 1 foot in, 1 foot out, like 1 foot I trust God, but also like I can like manifest in my own way, or like I can just go out and do it and not wait on his timing. So it's great. I'm very fortunate to have had the people in my life influence me in the way that they did, so that I can be at this point. Because I wouldn't trade the life that I have, like for the world. I feel so much better surrendered and living this kind of life and having the community and friends and relationship that I have. It's the most important thing. I'm very fortunate. So that's a little bit about my faith journey.
Yeah. So good. So good. First of all, Mega, I love that you know that it's 4 years tomorrow. I love that you have like that, you've tracked that date of like this spiritual milestone in your life. I just think that's really, really cool. Sometimes in our speedy culture, we lose the ability to celebrate, events like that, because everything just kind of runs together. So I really, really love that. One of the things that I heard in your story is the importance of relationships and making those connections and having people to walk with. But then also recognize that even when you're alone, you're not really alone, that God is with you and walking with you and stuff. So those are a couple things that really encourage me, and I resonate deeply with that. I've been in those lonely places and alone places, and I've had to learn that as well. And I wonder, and maybe this is something that we can kick around. I wonder if there's some type of hack that exists that can help young adults not fall into the pit of equating alone with lonely. I don't, man, if that seems to be like the $1 billion question. If we could somehow, like, I don't know, I'm not trying to come up with some gimmick or something, but there's got to be a truth that allows us to short circuit what the enemy would want to do to make us feel isolated and to make us feel alone. I'm so glad that you've kind of processed through that. Yeah. Andrea, I don't want to like, dominate, but yeah, tell me what you were hearing.
I mean, I think your story is beautiful, and I love that you've said it like a couple different times. That you wouldn't trade the story. And I think sometimes when we look back on our life, like we see the hard parts or the parts where maybe we felt alone or we felt, our life is falling apart, and to be able to look back on it and to see it like as a journey that's beautiful, a journey that's shaping you and still continuing to shape you. I just think that's awesome. I don't think everybody sees through that lens. I think a lot of times we see ourselves in despair, and like can't get out of that. And so it's just cool how you've been able to see that part. I had a question for you because I was thinking back, like, well, I had a couple questions for you. I did the math in my head. Are you 22, 23 years old?
26.
26. Okay, I did the math terrible. I was trying to go from 18 to fast forward
Why I
4
like
years.
you so much, Andrea. We're
Oh,
terrible
I
at
appreciate
that.
that.
good night, 26. So that's even better. I was going back to that moment when you said you were in college when you met that music teacher that was in that room with you. Were you at a Christian school? Were you at a secular university?
No, I was at a secular university in the arts. So that's like the not quite the Jesus loving people that you've met in your life. They're very
Okay.
much opposed to it.
Okay,
So
cool.
it's like the opposite place to find him.
Yeah.
So, man, I just think that's even cool that like God brought somebody into your life in that moment. I mean, obviously God is personal but brought somebody specifically in that moment when you needed them the most that happened to be, a Christ follower. But my question in that was, what was it about, was it a woman? Like the person who was talking with you? What was it about her that like made you feel like you in that moment could like share where you were at? Like what did she do, or what was it about her persona that like made you feel safe in that moment?
Maybe that's a really good question because I think about that often because I saw her about a year ago and we just kind of caught up and sitting there and she's in like there with her 2 kids now and like how her life is transformed and just make me being a very pensive person thinking about how like if I hadn't reached out for the initial help with that class, I would never have met her. Like how would my life be so much different? Um, More different. I think it was probably the love of Christ flowing through her, I have to say, and me just feeling that total acceptance, like total love, total like whatever it is, it's okay. You can like tell me, like that feeling that because she was also like, are you okay? And like Oscars isn't supposed to make you cry like this. I think it was that coupled with her genuine love of people because she loves Jesus. So I think that just made it seem like a place that I could like let go and just let her and let God and all of it out. Because I think with what Jerry's saying with like the alone and the lonely is that if you're alone and you're not kind of captivating your thoughts and giving them, it's really easy to like equate it to loneliness and then just kind of get like in a pit and self-isolated and almost like, oh, you should probably, you don't want to tell anyone you're in here. And there's a lot of shame about being like in pits and feeling bad and things like that. So, but I would say probably just her true inward and outward love for Jesus.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's just so cool.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so I think this one, something that you said, Megan, I think it might segue if I'm tracking right, just with like a lot of young adults and the things that I hear, but I want to hear like the answer from you. So I want to reflect back on you saying that you were living kind of this, you said 1 foot in and 1 foot out life. And I know that I lived there. I had to learn through the process that that's actually a miserable existence when it comes to faith, trying to live in 2 worlds. But the question that I want us to talk about next is something that you see as like a common issue facing like young adults in our culture today, or at least I'm not trying to put the whole culture on your shoulders and explain it to us, but what just from your experience and your sphere of influence. And before you answer that, I just want to give a little shout because Megan is an incredible singer. She was talking about like voice and I've heard her sing. She's amazing. So anyway,
I was imagining if you're going to school for music or doing music things, you gotta be good, right?
I mean, when you're in the arts at a pretty elite school, then that tells you right there that she's got something. And I've heard her sing, and she's an incredible singer. Anyway,
Awesome.
I just want to throw that to you because you
Thank
really
you, Jerry.
have a beautiful, beautiful voice.
Well, thank you. Something that young people today, I feel like the broad answer is all of the things that they're like we're as in me and everyone else are being told that will bring you joy and happiness and peace, or the absolute not the things that will.
Yeah.
But also feeling like there's somewhere like, oh well, you should, you might logically know that that's not going to make you individually happy, but if you don't have Christ, it's like, well, what else do you have?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if, because obviously like he is hope and he is where it comes from, and when you don't have that, or you do have that but then you don't trust it enough, it's really easy to like go out into the world and find other things um drinking or drugs, or even like gossiping, or having hate for your neighbor because they think differently than you. I think it's just all of the other ways of the world. And even like having when I was first started going to the small group at Southside, I thought, I was like, I think I got this Jesus thing figured out, but I was still like judging. I was still participating in gossip at work. I was still like honestly thinking like I was like what some of the things I was doing on the weekends with my friends were like okay. Because I was like, well, I go to church and I go to small group, and I was like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And then I was like, wow, I feel that 1 foot in is really 2 feet out, but me wanting to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel a lot of the people, it's such a tough world. It's definitely, my mom and I discuss this often because she's a baby boomer. She grew up in like the 70s and 80s. And we'll have discussions on how like just the way that the world is designed nowadays is different, and how people used to just, a lot of young kids like used to just do like go to work, get jobs, like go to college, come back, get married, settle down, things like that. Whereas now it's like that's being pushed off, which isn't, it's everyone's plan is fine, but it's like with that in between period. And I don't know if we're all like this in between period for me, I'm using to like strengthen my relationship with Christ and try to fully become that person, follow God's will as much as possible. Where other people, if they haven't made that decision, are just kind of living the follies of youth. Mm-hmm. And it's really sad because all of the avenues to try to find happiness, pleasure, peace, like purpose, they're not going to lead to where I think they believe they will. Yeah. So it's like, I think the biggest, I would say, all that to say, that big roundabout is the lie that everything out of Christ gives you purpose.
Yeah.
That's what I would say is the biggest issue, because none of it will ultimately leave you fulfilled like a relationship with him will.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's really good. I was having a conversation with a young adult the other day, and totally different topic, but the thought came to mind that I shared with them, that there's a lot of pain masquerading as pleasure. And so we're looking for things, and that looks good. And this takes us all the way back to the garden from the very beginning. That looks really good. But within it, there's no, like I've told, I've had to tell my own heart and learn this myself. And I've told anybody that I can, the world and the culture and the promises can never really deliver the things that our hearts really are craving. It looks like they can't, because it looks like everybody is involved. You made a really important point that the culture, and especially young adult culture, and especially college environment, college community culture, is very much and very often wrapped up in kind of partying and feeling good and low grade hedonism, and let me see how much fun I can have this weekend, and that's going to take the form of alcohol and drugs and sleeping around and hooking up and whatever. And you even talked about judging and gossiping, and those are other things that we kind of entertain ourselves with, but it can never ever deliver the goods that our hearts really want. And sadly, maybe not sadly, not predictably, we have to go through that. Like you kind of have to learn that, and to whatever degree, for yourself and on your own. But I do believe, I view you as a very mature young adult. Like you have a really strong sense of conviction. You know what you know. You know what you believe. You stand by that. And I know that's been a journey for you, but I really applaud you for kind of like the level-headedness that you really exhibit. So it's not that Andrea can say something, I can say something, we're twice your age and we can say, oh, just don't do this or just do that. And you just take that at face value because I think there's an experience that goes along with our faith that kind of builds it for, what it is. And you kind of have to go through those detours and, valleys and things like that. But what you're saying, yeah, Andrea.
Yeah, I think what you pointed out, it's interesting, like in a lot of the stuff that we read, like as people working with young adults, we talk about that 20 to 30 age, gap and how, what you just described, I think with your mom, like in a different generation, everybody was going to college, getting married after, getting a professional job, having kids. And it was just like, everything was just like, you knew the trajectory you were supposed to be on. And now that's totally shifted and people are all over the map. Young adults are all over the map. There's no map, like how do you get to point A to B? Well, there's like 900 different ways you can go. And I just think it's interesting that you pointed out, I don't know that I really thought about this, like because that's shifted and that's changed, it just kind of elongates like all the choices that you have in between. Like, so if you're, sometimes people will say, well, once you have kids, it shifts this, and this, in your perspective, like you're starting to live, you have to be less selfish in a certain way. Once you have a professional job, like you don't have as much free time to do. So I just think like that's just like such a good observation. I don't know if I think that's what you were saying, but like there's almost more times to chase. There's almost more time to chase after like what the world is offering, because there's this freedom in young adulthood right now to not have it all together. And I think it's like okay to not have everything together, but with that comes like whole other extra years of chasing after like various things. And so, I just said to a young adult last week that I was having coffee with, I was like, it's okay to not know like what you're going to do. Like, it's okay. Like, I think that's okay in today's world. But I hadn't really thought about with that also comes like all this freedom to just go after stuff that's not good too, which we all have, but I think it just opens the door even wider for that. So like, how do you navigate that? Like, how do you navigate, like what anchors you in when there's obviously, like you've said, Christ is the anchor for you, but how do you navigate that as like somebody that's living in that world?
Yeah, because I should preface this as someone, because I was thinking young adults not in the church. I'm also a young adult in the church, and I've also like made mistakes. Like I'm not trying to paint myself as like Sister Teresa. Even with the relationship with Christ, I've also been like, because Jerry was very nice and said I was very mature and I know what I ought to do. And Jerry, I sometimes do know what I ought to do, and I still don't do it. I do that less. Than I did when I was like a little baby Christian. I think the one thing that was I could separate it is that when let's say like you were like, I'm gonna go out this weekend and drink with my friends and I get way too drunk. Coming back for that, I'm like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. That like that low grade hedonism that does exist and pervades college, and I think supports the deference of maturity in people like 22, 23, to where they have been living a lifestyle of just like not being committed, not having to like you're saying, like make decisions for other people. Like it's just been about them and their pleasures in the instant moment seeking. That can just be like prolonged. And the good thing is that like the conviction is strong. And so when you make the mistake, you tend to make it once, and then you're like, all right, like I know that apple looks good and it might be like fun to like eat it, but the end result isn't. So let's just do that. And then just knowing that like there's someone that like forgives you is very helpful, because I think a lot of the times too, there's our culture is very driven on like success and being perfect and don't showing your failures, and failures are a part of life. And if you don't have, I feel like somewhere or someone you can like give them to,
Yeah.
It's really easy to get caught up in them and to make that your identity instead of making like who God made you to be your identity.
Yeah.
But I definitely do feel like the young kids struggle with like purpose and finding that true purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. And isn't it, I have an observation, and you can feel free to disagree with this. I see a connection between the digital age that you have been born into, that I'm not a digital native. Like I'm an analog dude. I grew up, it wasn't until I was out of college that I even had a beeper. You know what a beeper is? Like we didn't,
Yeah.
in college, we didn't even have email, nothing like that. You know, I had a phone with a cord, even in college. So I've lived half my life analog, half digital, but you're a digital native. And so I see, and you're talking about kind of like the postponing, the effect of like, you know, doing things later. And we have this thing I was reading, I don't know, a month or two ago about gig culture. And that's kind of like the 1 hour, because you're talking about, you know, a generation ago, you just picked your job and that's the job that you have and that's what you live with and that's what you live doing. Well, we have a gig culture now where you just kind of like almost like a little butterfly. You're just kind of floating from even industry to industry and job to job. You're kind of like, oh, I'll do this for a few years, then I'll do something else. And so that introduces this. So we have the digital, sorry, I got ahead of myself. We have the digital age that you're living in where we have everything spoon fed to us, customized to us. Everything is on demand. Whereas I'm just like scrolling. And if I don't like this, I'm going to do that. And if I don't like that for a minute, I'm going to go and do that. And so it is bled really, I think, into every part of our culture. And it's even invaded our spirituality to a degree as well. And so when you consider all the factors, it's no wonder that young adults today are really just kind of consumed in this. I don't have my feet under me yet because there are so many options. There's so many different things that I can do and that I want to do. And so I'm going to do a little bit of this and I'm going to do a little bit of that. I'm going to be a photographer for a couple of years and then I'm going to dabble in retail and then I might try finance or, you know, like trying all these different things because of the world that you've been given or, you know, born into. It really is this customizable experience that you take. So it bleeds into the way that we view everything and even relationships sometimes, and even our faith sometimes. So I don't know. I see a correlation between those two things. I'm a pastor right now. I've been a pastor for, I shouldn't say right now, like I just got here. But I've been a pastor for 30 years and I never ever want to stop being an effective servant and leader and encourager to people. So if you could, and I know you're one person, Mega, and if you look at the kind of the from your viewpoint, look at the church today, what do you think is what do you think is one way that maybe the church needs to rethink young adults or handling young adults or ministering to serving or teaching, I don't know, or investing in, however you want to couch it. What's one way as you look at the church, capital C? I mean, I know you're part of Southside Church, but you've seen other churches, you've been in other places. So just from your perspective, what do you think what lesson do we need to learn? What might we need to do differently or better or stop doing or anything like that?
That's a very good question. I don't know if even I have like a very like, you know, apples, banana kind of answer.
Yeah.
I feel like something that I, within my own journey, have really come to appreciate is like truth. Mm-hmm. And I feel like sometimes I'll say like, okay, dual answer. I feel like sometimes the church is like you're a single person or you're married, and then that in between, instead of just being like your own person, it's kind of like, well, you're just, and this isn't how my experience has been at like Southside. I don't want to characterize this. This is just what I see in like Christian world is like, if you're like an unmarried young lady, you're gonna just continue to be that unmarried young lady until you're married. But that's like the end goal. It's not just like, or you could not be, but then you not being is a weird category that I don't know if the church has, like unmarried adult, older adult, unmarried, like older adult is a very interesting category. And that was like something I had to be like, does that make me less than if I'm like not married? Right. You know, things like that. Just how the church is like obviously, like, because Jerry and I had a great conversation about like a year ago about this, and how like the whole purpose is that you should be like serving God and doing his will, and like whether that's with someone or like by yourself, that doesn't make either one like more or less, important. And then but going back to the truth thing, I feel like the churches that I've attended have spoken like true gospel truth. And like a lot of young people, like, so if they delayed their decision or didn't come to Christ, or even if they came to Christ and there's still things they're working on, like obviously he's the only one that can change all of us. If they're still like changing, it's like the truth of like, this happened, or these are things, but like you're new, but then this is the way you have to continue to change. I feel like with a lot of young people I find is that they also think that they're not happy, but they also think they're perfect the way they are. And I'm like that. So, and I know within my own faith journey, there have been things that like when I first came to Christ, I was like, oh well, that can't change. But then like now, like 4 years later, I'm like, oh, that was the only way, like through him that had to change. And I feel like it's important to have like that biblical truth, because I feel like sometimes churches are afraid to say the uncomfortable truth.
Yeah.
And within the opposite is once they say it, like people actually do respond well to it. And I think sometimes like people in their cycles of living, even like young people, like if they're in a cycle like partying or sleeping around or like not eating healthy or over exercising or coping or having all those things, like sometimes they just need someone to like stop the train for a second and then like have them like allowed to look around, and I'd be like, oh yeah, actually that's not a good idea, or yeah, actually I do feel empty after, or yeah, I am searching for something. So I don't know if that helps, but that's what I feel like. Truth is always the best.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good insight. Thank you, Megan. I think it's really, really important. Sometimes as a pastor, I can take certain things for granted that I am doing it, or that I'm doing it well, or that it's being perceived or received in a certain way. But what you're sharing is such a it's a good like recalibrating word for me as a pastor, and hopefully for other people. And I bet any young adult who is who's going to watch this podcast, they're going to be like shaking their head like, that is so right, and that's so true.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that goes along with like being authentic too. I feel like young adults are like sniffers of authenticity. They can tell they're not being authentic. But the church, I mean, the church, Big C church, I think is afraid sometimes to speak truth in like a cancel culture, and like finding the fine line of that. And like, what do you, I guess, can I ask a follow-up question to that? What would you say is like the best context to speak truth? Like if you were gonna say, I mean, because I think like when you just stand up in a pulpit and you speak truth, like I'm not sure people always hear that. So like, I mean, both of us are pastors. Me and Jerry are both pastors. So what would you say is the best context to be like truth tellers?
Yeah, I think it's like multi-level. I think it's like personal within like people attending the church, representing the church, like going out. I think scripture based. I went to I had heard a sermon a couple of weeks ago where they were preaching on the big meta message was like somewhere in Genesis, I think, and then like the big banner was like how children are part of God's plan, and then the subsections they started speaking like things that were counter to culture. And I feel like if it can be backed up by scripture, but also I think it was really circumstantial, because if you're like talking with someone and they're like, I feel like if you, it's tough because you can't just like, like go out and like every Sunday be like, we're all sinners, we're all should deserve hell, but we won't. So good. So think about that when you leave. Like that's not like that's it's truth, but it's not like a pretty way. I think it just really depends on the circumstances and obviously the spirit. But I guess a lot of the times the church likes to pretend that like things aren't happening, or like maybe there are like some people they're like, oh, well, I grew up like a pastor's kid and I just didn't believe, and then now I believe again. Whereas like other people can have like messier stories, and but for some reason they don't want to like be bringing that up, or they might feel like that's not like that's less than, or the church like because like he obviously like God can redeem all of us. So it's like all of it is valid, and that like there are people like still thinking this way or like that need to be changed or saved. So I don't know. It's a really great question. I think it's truly circumstantial because in my own life, obviously being a young adult, surrounded by young adults at like work and like life and relationships, a lot of the time I've had to talking with people that are in the church, aren't in the church, really not think about like, dang, that's definitely not like what like do I not say it's truth and let them like go on thinking that like first of all like maybe try to help them because sometimes people don't even realize or like just try to let them know like that there are better ways but then like always in like a loving kind way. I don't know if there's a pure answer for that, but I mean out to like circle back to something Jerry said. I was really fortunate that I grew up like my childhood, the tail end of my my young childhood was without technology. And then the beginning of like my teens was more technology. Like there are kids that are like 6 years old on the internet now. And I can't imagine what that's doing for their brains and how they're going to be when they're 12 and 14, 16. And I mean, it's going to be like a really rough, kind of like I always think of it as like baggage. It's going to be really rough to like unpack a lot of the baggage because all of that like online is like your identity is this, you're this, and your identity is in like this game you play or like the music you listen to or like the group of friends at school or this club and then you can go even like darker than that and it's just going to be like and then I think the thing that those people are missing are like maybe truth, like so I don't know. I'm sorry, a lot of rambling, but
no, it's really good.
I was just gonna say one other thing. Going back to what you were talking about, like being single, and I don't know if I heard you correctly, but like, is it enough to just like be single? Can I just be single in the church and like I am who I am, and I don't need to aim towards this or that? I just think that's a good word for the church too. I've heard that from a lot of young adults, and I think because some of transitions in life are like delayed that I like when I look at my young adult group, there's a ton of young adults that are amazing people who are not dating anybody and not married, but they're 26, 27, 28, and they're doing something in their profession. They're making a difference in the world. And I just think that's a good word for, people to hear that like we need to be reminded that it's not our marital status or our profession. Like that's not what our identity is found in. I do think sometimes the church does that a disservice. So like, I just appreciate you saying that. I think that's a great thing to see.
Yeah, very good. I would argue even more that I totally agree with Andrea, what you're saying. But I would argue that Scripture even probably advocates for the single life more than the married life. And so somehow the church, and I think the American church is especially guilty of this, is creating the ideal that, I mean, if you're single, what is your problem? Like you must be broken or undesirable or something. And I would say, man, look at Paul's words. He was like, if you to avoid burning in hell, sure, go ahead and get married. But yeah, he was completely dedicated to and really advocated for the single life. But man, so many churches kind of even inadvertently propagate this message that marriage is kind of like, yeah, that's what we're all going for. And I just don't think that's biblical. And I don't think that's helpful. I don't think it's true. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. So yeah, thanks, Andrea, for pointing that out. And thanks, Megan, for bringing that up. Because I do think that can be a little bit of a soapbox of mine as I interact with young adults. Let's not think that like the ideal and the goal is for everybody to get hitched and make kids. That is not the, the purpose. So we want to glorify God in whatever context we find ourselves, whatever stage of life. So yeah. That may sound like hypocrisy coming from a married dude who has 4 kids, but anyway,
but it was
just know that I'm with you on that.
No, it was like it came at an important time because I mean, I'm in a relationship now, but I was like single for 2 years, and right about the year mark, I kind of started thinking like, okay, because you look around the world, and I obviously wanted like a Christ relationship, and so I didn't want what the world's relationships were like.
Right.
And so obviously you're sitting there and you start to think like, something wrong with me? Like, is something wrong with me? Am I broken? Am I doing something wrong? Like, I trust God and his timing, but then also the other end of the church, it's like you're saying, like there's couples nights, and not that those are great things, but then like the day to day is that it should also be like all of us, because I mean at the end, like when we go to heaven, like we're all going to be brothers and sisters in Christ. Like that's what we're going to be, and that our worth and value is not increase, decrease. Like it doesn't come from that relationship. It comes from like the relationship with him and us. So yeah, beautiful. I'm just affirming. Thanks.
Awesome. I love that. Well, Megan, you've been a blessing to me, to us so much today. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing the insight. And I mean, I'm personally going to have some takeaways just as a pastor, as a follower of Jesus. So thanks for encouraging me today. And I'll speak on behalf of everybody who's ever going to hear or watch this podcast that you've been super, super helpful. Thanks for being real and authentic and open with us. I know it's going to be a big encouragement to a lot of people.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Super grateful. Thanks for being on here.
Yeah, of course.
Well, it's been good, friends. We're going to wrap it up here. Thanks to everybody who's listening to this podcast. And I hate to be the cliche dude, but smash that subscribe button, like or whatever the kids say, to be alerted to when we post another episode. We're doing these monthly at this point. As you can see, we are not the polished and pretty podcast that you can find pretty much everywhere else. Everyone else says everyone's got like an executive producer or something. We're just, Angie and I, we're just a couple doofuses sitting at a desk.
100% true.
Trying to connect with young adults. So that's what we're about.
But my dad and your mom subscribe. So, we're on our way.
I'll subscribe. That's 3.
Yes.
Woo.
All right. Yeah, I love it. We're raw and we like it that way.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks y'all, and thanks everybody for listening. And we'll see you next time on the Pivotal Podcast. Thanks for joining in the Pivotal Podcast, where we talk about young adults with young adults.